while I'm waiting for parts to turn up, I thought I would have a really good go at working out whether or not I had in fact dropped things down those holes. So I am using this thing called a Blue Fire, and it is basically a tiny remote camera thing with that bit lights up with LEDs, and you can vary the brightness using the dial on the side. But you basically download an app for your phone, connect to this via Wi-Fi, and then you can view the images coming back from the camera on your phone. So I can't film that because I'm using my iPhone to record this anyway, but I've had a good poke around in each of those holes and looked all the way down onto the back of the inlet valves, and they're completely clear of any washers or seals, but there is a hell of a lot of oil in there, and I'm still trying to work out in my mind whether that is normal for these engines or whether that oil is coming through from a turbo seal that's failing and you know, indicative of a bigger problem to come. Slight change of venue. I'm now inside. Here we have one of my injectors, and here we have the new copper sealing ring between the bottom of the injector and the cylinder head, and also the O-rings for the body. So I'm going to swap all of those. I'm going to clean these up just with brake and clutch cleaner, and try very hard not to upset that tip, because that is a real precision piece of engineering, and I don't even really want to rub it with a towel because it was all working before I took it apart, and I don't really want to bugger it up now. And then in the top, I don't want to introduce any dirt to the top there, so I'll turn it upside down and blast that up and then put a piece of tape over. So that is the old copper seal removed. That is the old O-ring, and that is my injector, and I've just cleaned around the periphery with a scalpel blade, and I did not do anything with that tip. It's still sooty. I was basically paranoid to touch it. So I'm going to put a bit of oil on that ring, slide that on first, and then put a new seal on. These are stamped out, and you have basically a curvy concave or convex shape, sorry, on this side, and this side is quite sharp and flat, and I don't really know which way round you should put it, if indeed it matters, but I'm going to be consistent and put it kind of curvy face down because I think there's more chance of it sealing. Once this is torqued down, that should compress anyway. It looks like this one did. You can see like the indentations where the injector's been splatted onto it. So yeah, I'm going to put it the same way round as I think the originals were. That's all of those cleaned up, and I've just put some black tape over the tops. I didn't go crazy cleaning up the tips because, as I said before, they have like precision drillings for correct atomization of the fuel when it goes in. If you're not careful, you can really screw that up. So I'm gonna leave that like that for the moment. In an ideal world, I'd send these off and get them cleaned like properly and all the atomization checked, because the car's done, I think, about 130,000 miles, but I kind of need it on the road, so if I have a problem I'll have to do it again, or I'll just put some of that cleaning gunk in the tank and see if that makes a difference. That's all the remains and all the crap that came off them, so yeah, kind of therapeutic to do in a way. Back out at the car, I've pretty much emptied a whole can of brake and clutch cleaner onto the engine before I take the cam cover off, because it's easier to clean it with the cam cover on, because it stops all of that stuff getting into the top of the engine. I then started removing the carrier for all of the wiring for some of the sensors and the injectors. They have these tiny Torx bit screws, and again, in my rather limited supply of tools, I don't have the right Torx bit, but I've found that again a 6-sided 3/16 socket this time actually grips them pretty well without rounding, and they're not very tight anyway, so you don't need a great deal of force, but that gets those off. Right, now I'm just going round and undoing all of these that actually hold the cam cover to the top of the engine. So well, I think they're all 10mm. Those around the actual edge are a standard bolt, and then in here it's the same stud that held the injectors in is actually a nut and stud, so just undo all of those progressively. Another quick observation, I couldn't get my tool down onto that one there behind that mass airflow or mass airspeed or something, so I just again undid that Torx bit, just the one at the top, and that's enough to slide that forward. Then you can get your socket in from the top. Well, I'm going through a lot of pain here, so hopefully you don't have to, whoever you are, and even if those people actually care. But all of that is undone now. I had a bit of a fail because I didn't understand how this wiring cradle separated from here. I thought you just put a screwdriver through it and pop it and it would release from these clips. It doesn't. If you do that, it just breaks. So I've no idea how that's meant to come off. I might be able to work it out when I get that whole thing out. It's now loose, but right at the back in that corner is another one of those stupid little Torx bit things. So I'm having to get in there with that again, 3/16 6-sided, to release it, and then hopefully I can lift the whole thing clear. Ta-da! After a lot of fucking around, it's finally off. This is the little bracket that was holding the wiring loom to the back of the cam cover, which was a pain. Don't know what I've done with the bolt. It was that one. Pain to get to. So there's the top of the engine exposed. What's nice on this is this thing's done 130,000 miles. Admittedly, most of it motorway, but actually the cams look really good. So pretty pleased with that. There's no evidence that anything ever fell into the engine, which is also very good. So I'm going to start cleaning that up, removing the old gasket and getting ready to put the new one on. I just peeled the old gasket out, and it's not rock hard. I mean, it's certainly not compliant. It's compliant that way, but the sealing surface you can feel is very hard. And I'm not convinced that it was this that was ever leaking. I think it certainly was about there, but it's a bit of a funny shape and there's not much clamping that bit in the middle, which is why I think it was leaking there. I think most of my leak was from the swirl flap spindles, but it's good to replace it anyway, because this admittedly isn't a BMW part. This is L-ring, so supposedly fairly decent quality aftermarket part supplier. But you can feel just how, well, I can feel just how squishy that is in comparison with that one. So there has been some age hardening of that. I'm still really pissed off at myself that I broke that brackety thing. There are some spring release clips on it, but they're not exactly easy to access. So no wonder I broke them. I think the idea is that you push down on that metal clip, that spring clip, and then that all ejects. But I'm going to go check on the internet how much one of these is, because it'll annoy me that I've broken it, and then look to fit it. I'm going to have to correct myself a bit. Earlier on I thought that actually those ports, that those rings could have dropped in. I don't know why, I just wasn't thinking straight, but would, once I had the cam cover off, would give me access to it. Of course it doesn't. They potentially could have dropped all the way down those. So I'm going to go back inside, charge up that USB camera thing again, bring it out here and have a look down those ones just to make sure that they hasn't gone all the way down in there. Back out here with my clever little camera. I haven't got that laptop out here to actually show me the pictures. It's just to act as a battery for this. But yeah, can have a good poke down these holes again, make sure that I haven't got anything stuck in there. Good news. I've had a good poke around in there. and I can't see anything other than shitty oil dregs. Ain't great there's shitty oil dregs there, but at least there's not metal and rubber seals. So that's good. Now it just becomes a laborious cleaning operation to clean up the top of that, clean up that, put a new seal in, put it all back together. It's Bank Holiday Monday. I've been at work upstairs in the office actually doing work, but now in the afternoon I've come down to play with the car again. This has now been cleaned up, so really it just needs a degreasing and theoretically it can go back on the car. I can't remember whether I spoke about this earlier in either this video or another one. I'm a bit kind of mixed up in how I'm editing all these videos. I don't tend to bother, I just slap them together and put them up. But it's more and more obvious to me now that this thing has been hemorrhaging oil out of the bottom of these swirl flap ports, and more particularly where the spindle goes through at the bottom, because they're all completely saturated with oil. So I've bought myself a blanking kit, so the next thing I need to do is strip all of that out. I've read on the internet, leave that in because the car needs to know that it's still plugged into that sensor. If it doesn't, then it thinks that it's got some kind of problem and might put an error code on, or the engine warning lights. The other thing I need to do before I clean all of this up is get the EGR valve and throttle body off the front. When I bought this car, I noticed that there was some discoloration and burning around here. So whether this has got super hot at some point, I don't know, but I really should get a new one, but I don't really want to spend the money at the moment. And as I've done about, I don't know, 55,000 miles on this one, and it still works fine, all I'm going to do is separate this, change the gasket, clean this out, and then clean that up and put it back together again. That was fairly simple. Just to get the, what did I do? Took that off first, the EGR, then I took that actuator off, pulled the bar out, and then all of those swirl flaps just unscrew and then pop out. So I'm going to have a really good clean up of that now. I might take it outside and blast it with a jet wash as well, because all of these inlet tracts are really crudded up. So while I've got it all apart, I'll hit it with a high pressure hose and clean it all out. I also thought I'd clean my EGR valve, which is that bit there. It's got a vacuum diaphragm in here, and basically engine vacuum sucks on that. Well, I'm describing what I think, not 100% know, so bear with me. Basically, you've got a valve in there, vacuum this side in that chamber, pulls the rod forward and opens the valve and allows gas to come from the EGR into the throttle body and then into the engine. This is manifold side, and that is inlet side, and this is the electronic throttle body. This actually looks, compared to some of the other ones I've seen, pretty damn clean, so that's reassuring. What I'm gonna do is separate the two at that join, because then I can clean this bit fairly robustly without ruining or worrying about getting crap in that throttle spindle or butterfly or wrecking it somehow or damaging the electronics. If you look, this is as it came out of the car. I've done no cleaning, and it's actually super shiny and bright, and it only gets crappy in the EGR itself, and even that, you know, as I say, it's not that bad. So I'm going to separate those two parts. Hopefully there's just a simple compressible O-ring in there and I won't need to buy a new gasket. I can just reuse that one. That's the throttle body separated. In terms of cleaning, all I've done is given it a very quick blast of clutch and brake cleaner. That rubber O-ring, I might look on eBay and see if I can get another one, just because it looks a bit tired and feels a bit hard. The EGR itself, I don't really have any proper way of testing it. You should pump that up with like a hand pumpy vacuum gauge, and I did buy one when I was doing that diesel Rover, but I can't remember what I've done with it. But just very simple test was to push down on the plunger to open the valve, which compresses the spring, which pushes the air out of the diaphragm. So what I did was I put a rod in there, pushed down on it, and then put my finger over the port, and then when I released on the bar, you could hear like a little noise on there. So that means that the valve diaphragm hasn't failed, and that works. So really, that's about as much checking as I can do. So all I'm going to do now is clean it up with a scraper and just get all that carbon out of there, and then give it a quick blast with petrol or something, making sure I don't get it in there because that will destroy the diaphragm. That's the EGR just soaking in some old petrol. So hopefully that will start to work away at some of that stubborn carbon. A lot of it I scraped out with a razor blade, but you can see the big kind of crappy chunks you get. Very nice. It's quite alarming to think that all of this stuff is freely circulating around your engine, and admittedly it doesn't all delaminate in one big lump and go into your cylinders, but you know, that's the kind of crap that's in there. It always makes me worry about those cleaning additives you put in, because if that were to all delaminate and go into your engine, it would be not so good. So gonna let that soak, and then probably get an old toothbrush and just scrape the last bits out before I put it back together again. While those other bits are soaking in petrol or just generally waiting to dry, I thought I'd come out here and start prepping the top of the engine for the new cam cover seal. Basically got to clean up all of these sealing faces. I'm going to go around with rag first, and then I'll go around with brake cleaner afterwards to degrease it. Then I'm going to go dig out some sealer that has to go wherever there is a half moon cut out. So the rubber will seal quite happily on the flat surfaces, but where you've got a steep internal angle, you need some sealer as well. So there's the two half moon cutouts at the back there, one for each cam, and then the big one for whatever that is, a vacuum pump or something, and then the other one for the front cam as well. I've done my first pass just with paper rag, no solvents on there yet. That is looking down into the port that takes the injector, and right at the bottom there, in all of them, you can see crap or like accumulations of dirt and dust and stuff. So I'm going to go and get a hoover and see if I can't clean some of that out, or at the very least sellotape a ball of blue paper on a stick and rag it around in there, see if I can get that out, because I don't want those injectors not to seal. And as if by magic, we have little compact hoover thing with gaffer tape taped to some clear thin diameter pipe. I don't know what it's for, but I found it in our stores cupboard and it's perfect for getting down in here. The only problem is, because of the step down, that little motor is drawing a lot of I don't know, meeting a lot of resistance trying to shift air that it can't get up that pipe. So I can't run it for very long because it will probably knacker that little motor. So I'm just going to switch it on and suck down those tubes and hopefully get as much out as possible. I'm sure you get the idea. That one, first one worked brilliantly. That's clean as a whistle. That one, there's a bit of a stubborn stain. That one came out nice, but yeah, I'll keep doing that until they're all clean. That's good. They're all pretty damn clean, or certainly a lot cleaner than they were. One word of advice, if you're going to do something similar and you've got a little thing where the exhaust is going to be somewhere near the engine bay, don't like have it facing the engine, because I nearly did, and when I switched it on, whoever used this last time had filled it with like normal dust or plaster dust or something, and it very nearly exhausted and filled the top of my engine with crap. So yeah, beware of that. Next thing is to do the final degreasing with brake cleaner. Take my new L-ring cam seal gasket, shove it in that, which I've already degreased again, just using an aerosol and some rag, and then I can put that back on the engine, put the nuts and bolts in and get ready to torque it down. Before I forget, that little bracket was a right pain in the butt to remove when the cam cover was still in the engine bay. So I'm going to unclip it from the wiring conduit, then bolt it to the cam cover, and then put it in the car and then clip the wiring back together. The bracket down here, which carries the majority of the wiring, which I broke stupidly, I assumed I could just buy that piece, but unfortunately that comes as part of the wiring loom from BMW, so unless you get that bit from a breaker, and they're unlikely to be able to remove it without also breaking it, you're going to be pissing in the wind really. So yeah, annoying. I saw the part number, got excited, googled it, and it is for the whole engine loom. So yeah, don't break that basically. I have had a bit of a result online. This is a PDF I printed off of all of the removing the intake and refitting the intake. It's not for an e60 or e61, but it is for an M57, so it's probably e39, because some of the airbox design is different for an engine that looks like that. So yeah, different to this one. But anyway, it's got valuable things like the tightening torques, and at the end it has a description of where to put the sealer as you're going around the front of the engine and the chains. So I saw that there had been sealant here and here and assumed that there should be sealant also like here and at the back, because the Nissan engines I've worked on before, basically you always put it on a curved bit, flat bit fine, curved bit put some sealer on. There's a part number for BMW's sealer, but I'm going to use this stuff, Loctite Black. 598 is what it comes up as when you search for it on eBay. It's basically a sealer that's good for permanent saturation with oil. I think it might say it on here. Basically, yeah, I always use it on engine bits and pieces. So I'm going to put some where the BMW guide says across here, but I'll also put a tiny smear on those other bits just for belts and braces. Sealer applied. I haven't gone crazy with it because I don't want it circulating in my oil. I wasn't intending to put a bit across there, I just happened to have it on the end of my finger as I was smearing that bit out. And then I've done what I said, put a tiny smear at the backs there. The BMW book actually says approximately 3mm wide and 2mm high, but how you're ever going to be that accurate, I've no idea. So I'm going to put the gasket and cover back on now. That went on perfectly. I was a bit worried that the gasket would drop out in places, or that I would knock my sealant as I was putting it on. The only thing you have to watch for is that pipe. You don't want to stress it too much, so I fed it in from that side, and it was clashing with that sort of bulkhead vent thing, whatever it was. And then down here I've still got that pipe which was fouling slightly, but no, dropped in nicely. I've just done those two up finger tight. Now I've got to go and put all of those bad boys back in there. There is actually some guidance onto all of those as well, including the fact that the ones in the middle, it would appear, go in first from inside to outside, meaning here working your way forwards and backwards to clamp the middle of the cam cover down, and then tighten the outer bolts diagonally and evenly. So probably start from the middle, going like that till you get to the front. So that's what I'll do. Another very minor but probably important point of information: most of these cam cover bolts and rubbers look like that sort of penny washer. There is one which is much smaller diameter, and that is the one that goes down there. So if you try and put the big one in, it doesn't fit. So you have one that's odd size, and it's the little one, and that's back there. Right, that's all torqued down. It was only 8 Newton meters plus or minus 1 Newton meter. It's inside to outside on the middle row, and then it said to do them diagonally on the outside, so I just went like that, a bit like a cylinder head. So it's all torqued down properly, and if you don't have a torque wrench, it's just an M6 thread into alley, so it's really not particularly tightly done up, and that's the sort of level of squish if you want to be technical about it. So it's to contact and then a bit more. It doesn't have to be really tight down, it's not pressurized or anything. So I'm going to grab the injectors and put those in. That's the injectors in. I'm going to leave it there for tonight because I've run out of time again. It's quite annoying not having this running, because at the moment I'm having to use my police car as my daily driver. It's kind of cool, but I didn't really want to be putting miles on it in this way. Ideally I'd have the diesel running, but sadly that is still very much not road legal. So hopefully once the BMW is fixed, I can crack on welding this back together. The fact it's sat outside all this time has not been kind to it. There's some flash rusting developing on there. I'm not so worried about like actual structural stuff, but it's a bit of a pain. Plus that I forgot to etch prime or anything, so that's sat completely unprotected. I think I will end up chopping off most of that B pillar and welding a new one in when I get round to it. So yeah, that's the end of play for today.